Hello, welcome to Fiberchats, and today my guest is Cairo Romaguera. I'm trying to roll my R's. He was just training me. And
Oh,
Cairo
sorry.
is New York-based designer, knitwear designer, and crochet designer, and knitter and crochet and fiber artist. So the first time I've met you was actually over the Fibery challenge, believe it or not. So I saw your
Really?
post back then. Yeah, you caught my eyes back then because it's like this is like a perfect place to meet new fiber artists, like somebody you don't really know. So it's like because every day you post new challenge and you get to see the same people and sort of like see the who who is who and like start looking at them. Why did you decide to do Fibery challenge? What was your reason for that?
So actually, I decided to do it because one of the kind of biggest questions on a daily basis is what to post to Instagram, right?
Right.
That seems to be like the biggest challenge that I have because I don't typically think that a lot of people are interested in what I'm making or especially the step by step process of my knitting or crochet. And sure enough, more people are interested than I would have ever thought. Um, and I thought the February challenge was really great because it gives you this whole idea of different inspiration to put for each day. So yeah, with that, it was really helpful, at least for February, to
Right. Did you
make that.
find it difficult at all, like middle of the month, the second part of the month, to like, did you plan everything from the start? Did you have like the whole plan? It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna take this picture. Or was it like you waking up in the morning and you deciding what to post?
Well, I definitely took like a look over the list of all of the challenges or the topics for the days. And I'm not really the kind to be like, oh, I'm definitely going to post this on that day. Maybe one or two would come across like that. But that's kind of what I liked about the challenge is it makes you think about, okay, so I don't know, maybe your favorite colorway or something or whatever it is, or favorite type of wool or yarn. And I'm like, oh, typically that's not something I would post about. So oh, hey, look at all of these boring colors I always knit with. Let me try to do something different today for February or whatever the theme was. But yeah, definitely as long as I had the topic for the day, it made it a little easier actually.
Right. And I noticed one thing we had in common was the struggle with drinking, the drink and eat together. Like, I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but you were like, I don't mix the two. I either
Yeah,
drink or I eat.
yeah, so it's funny because one of the biggest things that I actually did pre-pandemic in New York City is go to Club Coming for Knit at Night
Right.
every Tuesday, and it's hosted at this bar down in at the bar Club Coming in the East Village here. And I'm actually myself like not really a alcohol drinker.
Right.
Um, Mostly because nothing has like settled well with my belly. I keep trying and I just don't like anything. So I'm still
Right.
looking for the right drink.
Right.
But I definitely love to like go to that environment and see all of my fellow knitters there. And I'll end up drinking like a ginger beer or something. And I know there's countless jokes at that bar about like don't drink too much because you might end up dropping some stitches or don't work
Right.
on anything too serious. No complicated cables or color work.
Right. I saw one of your posts had those lighted needles. Have you
Oh yeah.
ever used them in Club Cummings?
So I didn't use them in Club Coming, but I'll tell you, I actually use them at home because my husband goes to sleep typically an hour or two before me, and then he'll get fussy with me about having the TV on too late. He's
Right.
like, "Shut the lights off! Shut the lights!" So I would keep the lamp on low, and those needles actually were a Christmas gift from one of my sisters. And I said, "Oh wow, what a great gift!" Because it's not something that I probably would have bought myself
Right.
on my own.
Right.
But I was like, why didn't I think of buying glow in the dark needles, right?
So talking about your sister, you are coming from a large family, right? There is like seven of you.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of six altogether. A couple are passed now, but I grew up with four at home, and then I have siblings in Brazil as well. My father is from Brazil,
Right.
so
Um, do any of them need
oh,
crochet?
fun story. So after teaching myself how to crochet and knit and all of that, um, I have recently, in the past couple of years, tried to teach two of my sisters. One of them kind of got it a little bit with a lot of help on YouTube. And she actually sent me like a screenshot and she goes, I don't know if this is right. I said, oh, well, from what I see, that's perfect stockinette stitch.
Right.
And then another one of my sisters is actually left-handed. And so I know everyone's always like, oh, you have to learn differently if you're left-handed. Um, and with her, when I would try to teach her how to knit, I actually didn't change anything. I know some left-handed people that, how do you say, reverse knit or knit
Right.
backward.
Yeah.
And I said, no, you got to use both hands. So I'm just going to show you how to do it and you figure it out. So it wasn't the knitting that actually stuck for her. Last summer, she showed me a couple pictures. She ended up crocheting a couple of like tube tops and halter tops during the summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, heck, I wasn't thinking of teaching you how to crochet because I know for that, it does matter if you're left or right-handed.
Right.
And she said, no, I just followed the right-handed video and just did what they did because I don't know what the heck I'm doing either way. And she made a couple of things, but they haven't stuck with it. So unfortunately, and
Well, they can come back to that.
yes, and the most recent is actually just a week or 2 weeks ago now. My husband's mother and one of his nieces were here visiting us in New York City. And the niece is 11 years old and actually taught her to knit. And she got it immediately.
Right.
We had a finished doll project that she completed and everything. So just make like a stockinette piece and fold it in half and stuff it and put some eyes and hair. And I was like, yes, perfect.
So cool. Do you find like, because you're doing this thing with Louis, you've been doing where you were teaching kids to knit at school, right? With Louis Boria. Do you find that kids get it easier than adults?
I want to say more or less, yes and no, because I feel like kids are still kind of learning their hand-eye coordination and how things are supposed to fit and feel in their hands. As adults, we're already kind of used to how we grab things, how we hold things, you know? So I feel like kind of the younger that the kids pick it up, it's a little easier for them in general. And I'll tell you one of the tricks actually was when we did the Yarnamentary with Louis Boria, we actually knit the first row for them and taught them the knit stitch right away and then teach how to cast on later.
Yeah. So and it's less frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then they already feel like they knitters, so they already have the skills. So it's like it's just another trick. That makes sense. That's actually clever. Yeah, that takes the pressure off of it.
Yeah, because I mean, just learning a long tail cast on, that's almost rocket science on its own when you're first starting, you know?
Right. Now, I remember like one summer I was with my grandma. I was probably like 7 or 8 or something, and there was nothing to do. So it was just me and her. So she decided, and she was extremely crafty. She knew like how to do everything. So she decided to teach me how to knit. She gave me like a ball of yarn, 2 needles, was like, here, this is how you do it. So she started it for me. She cast it on and she just showed me the knit stitch. And then I came home, like, so I knew the knit, the purl, but I didn't know how to cast on or cast off. And then I came home and it was basically like the end of it. I never touched the needles again until 4 years ago. And then I decided to like make a gift for a friend of mine who was pregnant with her 4th, and as she assured everybody, her last child. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make something special for the baby. And I went on YouTube and I had to learn the cast on and cast off there. But like the knitting itself was like muscle memory. It was so easy for me.
Right.
Like it just came right back somehow. Do you, like, how did you volunteer for that program? How did you first hear about this program? How did you get involved?
So I actually mentioned Club Coming and the Knit at Night on Tuesdays prior. And that's how I met Louis, because he actually came to do like a guest speaking night. Right. Yeah, guest presentation. And I went up to him and I said, you know, if I never hear your name again, I'll be perfectly fine. Do you know how many people have told me that there's a guy who's knitting on the trains in New York?
Right.
And it was definitely a joke, you know, but my friends and family had all tagged me in articles about Louis. And I was like, why are you sending me this? They're like, you knit on the train, don't you? Like, where's your picture? And I said, oh, well, I don't know, but I'm happy to see that I'm not the only one who's doing it, you know?
Right.
And then from there, that was at the same time that Lewis was just about to start with all of the volunteering stuff. And I volunteered to be a volunteer.
Right.
Like, hey, so I heard that you're looking for people and I'm totally interested if you have me.
Right.
And we really just went from there and started um, being in a lot of communication. And I was helping out a lot with that. That was really fun.
Right. And did you meet a lot of people, like other volunteers? Did you make friends there as well? Or was it just like, was it purely for the sake of the children, or did you have fun at it, visit as well?
So I'll actually say that the children was not necessarily the first thought. I went into it going with the thought like, I'm gonna do this because it sounds fun, right? Just happens to be children who are gonna learn. Because I'm kind of convinced like anyone could learn how to do anything. You
Right.
just gotta try and practice, right? So but I did meet a lot of people who I'm still in contact with in like the fiber community that I didn't know before that. And that's kind of what got my foot into the knitting world a little bit,
Right.
like getting to see other designers. One of the people that I speak a lot to is Alexis, who cosplays, and
Mhm.
she knits or crochets all of her pieces for her cosplay.
Mm.
Um, I met another Alexis as well, Mantione, who is the creator of My Two Ladies Knitting Needles,
Mhm.
and they're like these very long needles meant to hold tons of casted on stitches for blankets or large shawls.
Right.
So these are people like, where would I have met them otherwise? Maybe at the bar that I was knitting at, you know.
Right.
But I definitely met a lot of people. I obviously got some students who were older as well, and I'm still in communication with them and
You
seeing
did
like,
some Zoom classes as well, right? Like over the COVID, you had some Zoom classes for knitters.
oh, actually, what I did during COVID, I did a class for Vogue Knitting Live. It was one of their first, well, actually, it was the first
Right.
classes in Spanish that they were offering. So me and my friend Jaime were actually teaching those crochet classes in Spanish for Vogue, and
How
that was
was
super.
it?
It was a whole nother world for me. I'm very like one-on-one. I'm very used to doing things in person.
Right.
So all of this like going onto the computer and stuff has been super new to me. I just recently got like my own home desktop and everything. And I grew up in a household without a computer, you
Right.
know? So I've always been used to doing things hands-on in person. But it's been really cool to see like what people you could connect with through these, these Zoom meetings, interviews, everything. There's so many people out there.
Right. Right. Um, does your husband know how to knit?
We have attempted and failed. So my husband is trying to find what is his like handicraft as well. We've tried crochet, knitting, embroidery, and cross stitch. What was the last one? Oh, jewelry making with polymer clay and beads. So there's a lot of like art supplies in the house at the moment. Some of them are kind of sitting in bins and drawers and corners,
Right.
but that's actually kind of very similar to how I was raised. My mom always had some kind of arts and crafts around us.
Right.
My mom knows like a little bit of crocheting, and at one point I got much better than she could ever be. And she said, "Oh, you brat! Like I was the one who told you you should do this. Now you're better than me, you know."
Right.
So yeah.
Is he supportive of you knitting all the time?
Oh yeah. So fun fact, if I'm in the bed, I'm knitting.
Right.
I'm basically knitting wherever I am, at the beach, on the train, in the park.
I
But
saw that.
especially,
There's a
yes,
lot of pictures of you
everywhere.
everywhere.
But if I am laying in bed and just watching TV, I will fall asleep. I
Right.
have to have a knitting or crochet project in my hand, or the TV is not enough entertainment for me. I have
Right.
to like keep that mind going at the same time, as crazy as that is. But and another thing is he's kind of the secret mastermind behind a lot of my projects and ideas,
Oh, how so?
because yeah, he just thinks completely outside of the box in a way that I wouldn't.
Right.
He's like, "Oh, do something different. This looks the same as that designer's thing or something. Do something different." And I'm like, "No, how do I explain? could tell me to make a sweater in a crazy direction or something. And I'm like, no, it's a top-down raglan. There's only one way you could do that. You can only achieve that this way. You don't knit, you don't know. But he's like, no, you got to think out of the box and you got to use different colors and textures. So it's actually helped me a lot, honestly,
Right.
because just look at things a little differently.
Yeah. Do you have like a favorite type of project?
So let me tell you something fun is for the first like 10 years or so of my knitting, I don't even know what I was knitting and crocheting, mostly hats, honestly. Because I was too scared to cast on a pair of socks. I thought that was the most daunting thing ever.
I still think so. I've
I'm
knitted
now like,
Shetland lace. I've knitted like whatever you name it. I've knitted it, except for I only done one pair of socks.
really? Wow. Well, I actually cast on my first pair of socks like about 4 years ago now, I think. And from there, I just kind of got like obsessed with sock knitting. And
Right.
I didn't choose the easiest sock in the world, in my opinion. I chose like the tube sock with the afterthought heel, which involves cutting into your knitting. So I'm
Okay,
like,
that doesn't sound very easy. I'm sorry.
it's
That's
like,
what
whoa.
scares me about sock knitting is that exact thing.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna voluntarily cut into my knitting. Like, what if this goes horribly wrong?
Right.
At the end of the day, it's just yarn and it's not
I mean,
hurting
I
anyone.
feel like that's less scary than like sticking the sweater because at least it's a sock.
Yeah.
It's a small item, you're cutting, but it's like you're only cutting a heel, so it's like an inch, 2 inches, not like the entire length of a Fair Isle sweater that you spend like weeks knitting.
Yes. That's actually still on my like list of things to design and to knit. I think I'll knit someone else's pattern first before trying to go into it on my own because I'm really scared to steek.
Right.
So definitely if anyone whoever's watching this video and knows steeking, let me know like what the trick is. I don't know if you have to use like a rougher yarn so that the
Oh,
fibers.
I know a perfect person for that. So I've
Oh,
interviewed Hazel Tyndall, who is the guru of Fair Isle knitting in Shetland, taught
oh,
it for years. She's teaching a class in Shetland Wool Week where they make a bookmarker. So they basically knit in the round Fair Isle and then cut it, stick it, and then they turn it into a bookmarker. So just watch your interview and
oh,
contact
wow.
her. She'll help. She's very helpful.
Definitely, I gotta learn the tricks. But to answer the question about like what kind of items do I knit the most now, I guess I'm definitely very fond of sweaters now.
Mhm.
I just knit my first sweater. Well, that was probably about 3 or 4 years ago as well. Around the same time that I got adventurous in sock knitting, I got adventurous in what else could I make?
Right.
I made my first shawls and my first sweaters. And I just realized, especially with the sweaters, I made my first sweater without any help, any direction at all. And I was like, okay, it's a front piece, a back piece, and
Was
two
that
sleeves.
that burgundy? Uh,
Yes,
the
yes.
I
It
love
was
that one. So such a beautiful color.
trying to think of what did I do with that now? I'm like, where is that sweater? I gifted it actually. But yeah, so I it was that burgundy one, and I said, it's not that hard. You know how to like do increasing and
Right.
decreasing, all kinds of shaping. So just make it. And actually, all I did was like two rectangular front pieces, a big rectangle on the back, some
Right.
shaping on the sleeves, and then just added the border all the way up and around. So, and the reason I made that sweater was because I was trying to look through Ravelry, Google, all kind of like image searches, and I was like, I'm not seeing what I want.
Right.
And I think that kind of helps inspire us as designers a lot of the times is we end up making what we want to wear.
Yeah, that's a lot of people say that actually, that like that was the push to try to do the design because they couldn't find the pattern that they like.
Yes, exactly. And that's
I
exactly
saw that you have a few patterns on Ravelry now. When did you brave your first design? When did you decide to post it?
so I just decided to post it. Was it this year or the end of last year? One or the other. It was within the past 12 months. I
Right,
say,
right,
I'll say that much. So because I just got into designing seriously last year,
right,
and I went out of my comfort zone and was like, you know what? People are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. And if they love it, they buy the pattern. And if they hate it, they'll just move on to the next page anyway, right?
Right.
We're so loaded with content anyway. So you'll just either stop or go.
So
Um,
how was it? Did they love it or did they hate it? Like, what was the response to your first pattern?
so I think the very first pattern that I actually posted on Ravelry ended up being my hat that is the rent hat. Um, and of course, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm forgetting the number that is in there, 526,000, I think. And
Oh,
that
yeah,
was,
I saw that one. Yeah.
yeah. So me and Louis Boria, actually, he made the knit version and I made the crochet version for that. Um, and I was like, got a lot of great responses back. People were like, oh my God, I love Rent. I love that musical. I've been waiting for something like this. And I was like, yes, I'm the one who did it. You know? So it's been really good response so far. I got started also last year with designing for Knit Crate and Lady Dye yarns.
Hmm.
And so my first designs came out with them, and I'm still working with Lady Dye yarns for upcoming projects this year as well.
Oh, that's
And so it's
exciting.
been really, yeah, it's been really fun, like a exciting adventure so far to see how I could keep thinking of something new, because I
Right.
really don't want to be repetitive and come out with the same things all the time.
Right.
But you know, you keeps your brain active and going.
Well, I want to ask you something different. So, you've been performing as a drag queen for 10 years.
Yes, you've done your research.
I did. And you also did the makeup, right? You were a makeup
Yeah.
artist. When you were doing the drag queen acts, did you ever needed any outfits for that?
So I have a sweater that's one of my first raglan top downs that I started about 4 years ago or so, and it's still waiting for sleeves because I thought this was going to be the big performance piece.
Right.
I said, "Oh, this is going to be like a bright fuchsia sweater." And I had like this variegated, crazy colored yarn that was going to do like a loop stitch or fringe or something that moves when I move the arms, you know? So I've always wanted to put something on the needles that would end up on stage as well. I haven't performed in a few years now because I started a 9 to 5 job at a hospital as well.
Right.
Um, so that kind of, you know, it's not conducive with going out late at night.
Right.
um,
But do
yeah.
you think like you thought like were you a different person as a drag queen, like aesthetically,
Um,
from your usual Cairo?
I think, well, first of all, let me say, as being someone who identifies as a man and also having been a drag queen, um, women's clothes are just much more fun.
Right.
Like,
You know, like when you shop for little boys and girls clothes, it's just like so different. Like you have,
oh,
because
definitely.
I have a daughter and I have two sons, so it's been both, you know, and it's just like all the like the frilly little interesting things for girls,
Yeah.
and then there's just like pants and sweaters.
I struggle with this as like a grown man now. Still, I'm like, oh, guys' clothes are so boring. And if I find a women's piece that I feel that I could pull off as, you know, part of my outfit, like I'll totally rock it. It doesn't bother me.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think that, so my friends who are, you know, my closest friends know that myself and then Sasha Montgomery, my drag persona, um, they say we're a little different in personality, which is funny because I think I'm the same both ways for the most part. Um, and as far as style, I think that in the world of drag, you could easily do something crazy, do something different, do something very different from what you're used to. And
Right.
I want to actually connect that to knitting because I noticed that it seems like when speaking to guys who knit, there's still a lot of men who either were at some point or are still kind of nervous about knitting in public because of stigma, right?
Right.
And I think that definitely influenced my life personally because I was already used to going out in full drag and being seen as something different, you know?
Right.
So if somebody was looking at me weird on the train because I was knitting, I was like, whatever. I've
You
gotten
haven't
this all
seen me in
taken.
drag outfit.
Right. I was like, well, just wait until there's a knitting drag queen on the train. Then you really blow
Have
your
you
mind.
ever done that?
So
Have
I'm not, just because on the nights that I would have shows, I didn't have enough room in my purse for my knitting too.
well, all the makeup you had to bring.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Do you miss that part? Do you miss that the performing?
You know what's funny is, in general, I'm not a show person. I'm not a like a Broadway person. I respect all the work that they do, but I just didn't grow up like going to shows. And I've only gone to my first three Broadway shows now, which were Pippin, Aladdin, and Cats. I just went to those like in the past 7 years or so of my life, and it was a whole nother world that I was just not used to. And even with the drag performing and stuff in New York City, a lot of the drag shows are based off of Broadway performances as
Oh,
well.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not naturally like a theater person. I'm not naturally an actor or
Right.
anything like that. So it was definitely a very different realm to me. Um, and it was interesting to see how to like connect that into my own life, because I learned this like extra level of confidence that I probably had already. I think I've always been a very confident person, a little shy when I was a kid, but I broke out of that pretty easily.
Right.
um, but definitely the drag helps you like expand your boundaries. And like I said, there's a couple of uncomfortable parts of it as well. You know, sometimes people are not the nicest or make comments and stuff, but it kind of helps you build a thicker and tougher skin. You
Right.
get stronger because of that.
Well, talking of the mean people out there, have you ever had any uncomfortable things about knitting in public, like any bad stories? So usually people react positively with interest, with curiosity, like what's usual reaction?
Yeah, I say that the funniest or weirdest things that happen to me while knitting, especially because I knit a lot on the train. I have a hour and a half commute to work and then back home.
Right.
So I just find that would be a gap of time that I would lose altogether, right? So the craziest things that have happened are, especially tourists to New York City from other countries will just blatantly take their phone and like take a picture of my face. I'm like, you could only ask for the picture, but be a little more subtle about
Well,
it if you're
hey, that's how Louis got famous, so
yeah.
maybe that's your chance to go viral as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other one that was actually probably the funniest, I think, has been there was this woman from Germany, and she just kind of started screaming on the train. She's like, "Oh my God, oh my God, I've never seen a man knitting." And I was like, "Hi, how's it going? Where are you from?" And she's like, "Oh, in Germany, nobody does that. Like, you don't even see women outside knitting in public, yet alone a man." And I was like, "Oh, well, welcome to New York, you know?"
Right. The land of opportunities. You know what's interesting? I was talking to Alison Randall. She's a designer, Fair Isle also designer from Shetland. And so in Shetland, they used to have this program in school where like all boys and girls were all taught how to knit. So it was, it's like starting from elementary school into the middle school. So I was talking to her because she mentioned something about that I interview a lot of guys. And I was like, Alison, actually, I was thinking about it. Like, do you know any men in Shetland who knit? And suddenly there was this pause. And I was like, really? Because like everybody's been taught, and every person that I talked to from Shetland, they were all saying how like the brothers used to knit, the boys used to knit. So I was like, where are all those boys? Like, what happened? Why are they not knitting anymore? Right.
Definitely.
But it can be cultural. Like sometimes like when you talk to people from other countries, it's you start feeling how like social America is in terms of knitting, how it's like there's all these knitting groups and knitting clubs and knit nights and yarn stores, and it doesn't exist in a lot of other countries. And also the fact that like internet brought all of us together, it's like suddenly those people like finding their groups and finding their people from different countries. It's like you get to meet different artists from different countries, so it's interesting to see like all the different aspects of life of a knitter from a different place.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because in my own personal experience, like I speak Spanish and Portuguese fluently,
Right.
and I've spoken to a lot of people who are Ecuadorian or Peruvian background, for example, and especially from the indigenous groups in those countries, it's common and like they make part of their living off of that, off
Right.
of crochet work. Excuse me, they're famous for like their bags and
Right.
hats, I think, in Peru. And it doesn't matter like if you're a man or a woman, that's just what those people do.
Right. Right.
And then a couple of other references. I think it's super interesting. You hear about back in like World War I, World War II, they were asking everybody, men and women, to
Neat
contribute to
socks.
the war effort by knitting.
Yeah.
I think it was like knit your bit.
Yeah, it
um,
was the patriotic thing to do, to knit like for the soldiers the socks and the hats and the mittens to keep them warm.
I also heard something about like back even before that, that soldiers would receive like a quantity of wool and have to knit their own socks or gloves if they wanted them. They're
Right.
like, well, here it is. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool in my head.
Right.
um, so, and then the last thing I've seen, especially in countries like Estonia and Lithuania, where they say that like nowadays it's more common that's passed down with the women in the family, but at one point, all of the children, kind of like you were saying with the Scottish knitters as well, all of the children in the house, as of like 3 or 4 years old, were picking up needles and learning how to knit.
Right.
Just,
Well, I mean, have you read or watched Outlander?
I
There's
have not.
like oh, serious. Like
Oh
you
my God.
have to
I
watch.
need to get on it.
I'm like having the biggest crush on Jamie, so it's like everybody has to watch the Outlander. But like the point is, there is this one episode where so it's like in Scotland in 1800s, and the guys all pick up needles and start knitting socks, and Claire, who is the woman who got there from the 20th century, doesn't know how to knit, and they're all making fun of her because it's like
Oh,
such a life skill. But like
oh,
there is a historic precedence to that because they used to have just male knitting guilds in Europe, like in the
mm.
beginning, and women were not even allowed there, and it was like what men would do in the winter. They would just knit socks.
Yeah, I've done a lot of like research just out of curiosity about like who used to knit, and I always see those things about the guilds, and I'm like, it's crazy how things change over the years.
Well, hopefully we can shift the wave back as well, a little bit and make it again cool and acceptable. Do you wear
Definitely.
your knits everywhere? Do you wear your shawls and your sweaters like everywhere you go?
I'd be lying if I said yes. I'm actually really bad at wearing my knits because I'm so afraid of like getting them messed up, like either dirty or something pulling on, I don't know, on anything. Um, I feel like when I finish knitting a sweater or something, that's exactly when like it gets stuck on something and pulls a big like, no, why did this happen? So I need to get better at wearing my knits. Now that I'm knitting sweaters and shawls and even cowls, which was something I never knit in the past. Now that I do knit it all, kind of like I guess wearing it just to honestly just kind of show off, like, hey, look what I made.
Right.
So at my job or at my knitting groups and stuff, but especially at work, now everyone's like, oh, did you make that? And I'm like, of course I did. Don't you know? And actually, a quick side story. A couple years ago, my mother bought me a knit sweater and for Christmas. And I said, Mother, what are you doing? I have a reputation to uphold now. I can't wear this.
Right.
So I wear that on days that I don't go to my knitting groups.
I know, like my parents went to Ireland before COVID, and they bought me this like gorgeous cabled sweater. It's almost like a coat, and it's like really beautiful, and it's really warm, and I love it. But it's like machine knit, store bought kind of thing. And then I went to Rhinebeck visit just because it was like light but warm, and everybody was asking me if I knitted it, and I felt so guilty. I felt like I was a total imposter.
Right. Oh, geez.
Well, talking of Rhinebeck, are you coming this year?
Um, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I just recently found out that it was happening again this year.
Right.
Um, I'm still kind of like a little paranoid about going certain places. But since I eat out at restaurants like every weekend, I guess I'm fine to be around people again.
Right.
um, I do gotta say what I really really do love just out of convenience is Vogue Knitting Live, because it's here in New York
Right.
City.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just take a 20-minute train and I'm there, you know. Rhinebeck was, I only went one time, I think about 3 years ago now, or two, something like that. And I definitely liked it. I think actually my favorite part, aside from like all of the yarn, one thing that I thought was cool was the other kind of knitting merchandise that you could get, like water bottles and t-shirts and all these things that just
And
have
little
knitting.
llamas.
I'm all about it. I'm like, oh my God, things that are not knit things, but
Right.
like accessories and coffee mugs. So I think that's super cool. And then one of my favorite parts, I think, was actually seeing the sheep get sheared.
You know
I
what
had
was
never
my favorite? They
seen
had
that.
this llama and goats parade, and they were just like walking through Rhinebeck with some like two-toed horns,
Oh
with
wow.
llamas and goats, and it was like the most interesting thing to watch for
Oh
me.
wow. Yeah, no, I like the experience of seeing I might say these animals wrong. Let's see. The Angora rabbits, Kashmir
I
goats.
almost I almost brought Angora rabbit home. They
Oh
were
really? Oh
I
my
mean they
God.
were just like so fluffy and luxurious.
Now, realistically, I would go crazy having an Angora rabbit at home because I
Right.
mean, I just have a lot of hair in general and I shed all over my house. I don't want anything else shedding all over the house, you know? But I thought that that was super cool because, I'm a city boy through and true. So it's so different from anything that I would see here in New York, you know?
Right, right.
And I think I was thinking of there's a good chance of me ending up at Rhinebeck this year because my husband hasn't ever seen that experience before. So
Yeah, I
like
think it's fun to go like as a couple there because there's good food, there is some entertainment, and then the nightlife. You can make it into like a romantic getaway,
whole event, a little weekend getaway or something. Definitely.
right? Well, I saw that your husband is wearing your socks. Is that the only thing he's wearing?
Um, oh, that's a good question. Well, that's the most common thing that he wears because um I am not a socks to bed kind of person.
Right.
Um, I'm also a like I can't have the blanket over my feet. When I sleep, I get like burning up feeling and sensation. I'm like, oh my God, it's a sauna in here. But my husband sleeps with socks on. So all of my socks that I'm too scared to use anyway. I'm like, no, they're too pretty to wear. And then he says, oh, well, you didn't make them for nothing. Give them to me. Um, and I'm like, all right, well, at least that way they'll go to good use.
Right.
And I think the most special pair that I had made him was after we got married 2 years ago now. We got married, and I actually made him like a wedding gift from me, which was a pair of socks. And he wore those until there was no saving them. There were holes. I patched the hole up like 4 times, and eventually I was like, oh, they're done. Like I got to get rid of them. He actually got rid of them, I should say. I was like, no, you were supposed to save them. Like
Frame
we're not
them.
gonna get them frame them or something. I don't care if they have holes, but he got rid of them. So that means he threw them out. I don't want to say it. It hurts my heart. But yeah, so and I make him shawls and things. I've made him a couple of sweaters, but that doesn't always go over well because um he's picky and I am insistent that he's gonna wear whatever I make him. So I made him this like great winter inspired sweater last year with snowflakes across it. And I'll probably end up wearing it this year because he never put it on. And I was like, you were supposed to wear this for the winter and you didn't put it on once. Why did I make this? But I knit because I like it, because it's enjoyable to me.
Right. So what's your plans for the rest of this year, for next year? Like what's the big design plans and classes and all that stuff?
Um, as far as designs, for the most part, besides trying to come out with some of my own stuff to put on Ravelry, um, I'm working with lady dye yarns mostly this year. So I have a design coming out with her each month until December for the rest of the year. So that'll keep me a little busy.
And
Um,
those designs people can buy how?
so I excuse me, I get to sell them after like 4 months of them being exclusive for her. So
Mhm.
if anyone wants to buy them while they're part of her, exclusive moment, sorry, um, they can actually get like her kit and they'll
Yes,
get one of
say
my
that.
patterns with her yarn subscription.
Right.
And then I think Lewis also mentioned him and I are both working with the Candid and Colorful collection
Hmm.
that she's coming out with later this year. And that's a publication for BIPOC. I
Right.
always say BIPOC, but I guess that's too long for people. And so I'm really excited to be included in that because I am half Brazilian myself, and I do identify as half Latino with indigenous Amazon Indian background, actually. And so
Oh,
the fact
interesting. That's
that,
an interesting mix right there.
yeah, and then the other side of my family is Greek. So with more mix. So it's very different. And I feel like in the best way possible, but sometimes um, I have to kind of defend myself as a light-skinned Latino man. Like, hey, I'm totally about all of the movements that are going on for everybody because I think that's great. But I just want to point out, like, I'm Latino too,
Right. Right.
like I'm not looking for special treatment or anything, but don't ignore my experience as a Latino person as well, just because I'm actually light skinned.
Right.
Kind of like constantly having to show that I'm just as Latino. So I was really flattered to be
Part of
included
that.
in that conversation.
Right.
Yeah, I hope that
I
makes sense.
also I noticed that you also mentioned that you like to cook. So when you cook, is that like influence? Is that like pizza or is that like Latin cuisine or is it Greek cuisine? Like what influences your cooking?
Yeah, so what influences my cooking, I would say, is definitely a lot of the restaurants that I end up going to here in the city. I say the city, that means Manhattan.
There is only
um,
one city.
but yeah, so like my family's from Brooklyn on my mom's side, and then from Brazil on my dad's side. I grew up with influences from both, and I grew up in very Caribbean culture, but more so the Spanish side, Spanish speaking of that. So Dominican, Puerto Rican. My sisters are half Puerto Rican actually, and so I grew up with that food. That's like normal cuisine at my house. So to be more specific, like rice, beans, fried chicken, stuff like that. But I've also taken aspects from the Greek side, like moussaka and anything with spinach, basically. I love my veggies, my Mediterranean kind of dishes. But I also like to use a lot of different herbs and spices that I didn't grow up with.
Right.
Um, Turmeric and thyme and rosemary. I never used those in my life.
Right.
And a lot of that actually comes from a lot of inspiration from Russian food, Turkish food, some stuff, sometimes even like curries from Japan and Thai spices as well. I don't really like too much like spicy stuff.
Right.
So, and sometimes the Thai food is too spicy for me. So, yeah. And it's funny because if you think about cooking, that's kind of another hobby or interest that gets gendered a lot of times, right? Is like, oh, men don't do that. Well, I'm pretty sure men still need to eat.
Exactly.
So at
Somebody
the
has
end of
to
the
feed
day, if I'm cooking dinner, I'm cooking dinner. My mom taught me to cook as early as 3 years old.
Oh,
She
seriously.
put me on a step stool and told me to crack the egg. And by 5 years old, I could prepare dinner by myself.
Wow.
Really, no exaggeration. I know it sounds crazy, but my mother always was very strong with me. I'm the firstborn of the family, right? So she said, one day I'm not going to be there for you. You need to know how to do this for yourself. So
Right.
I knew how to cook and clean and wash clothes and clean house, everything real early.
Right. Well, thank you, Mom, for making such a great human being who is totally self-sufficient. All the great moms out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so very much for being my guest today. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited that you gave me this opportunity. It's really a pleasure.
It's very nice to meet you.
You as well. Thanks so much.